Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and today we're exploring the stars with Gavin Prime, who's the founder of Inzodiac, which is an innovative app that leverages astrology, but not just for dating, also for forging lasting friendships and business connections. And we'll uncover the journey from a simple idea sparked by dating dilemmas to overcoming major hurdles like development setbacks and personal health challenges. And Gavin shares his insights on pivoting focus, rebuilding his team with university contacts, and gearing up for the future and fundraising to launch Inzodiac across major global markets. Make sure you don't miss any future episodes by subscribing to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And you can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story like Gavin. And you can find out how in the show notes. So get ready for an enlightening episode on how connecting the celestial dots can lead to meaningful human relationships. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here today with Gavin Prime, who is the founder of Inzodiac. So Gavin, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
It's pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this. So tell us about Inzodiac. There's a clue in the name. What's it all about?
So Inzodiac's an app that uses star sign compatibility to bring people together for friendship, dating, or business.
Okay,
so that's the crux. That's the crux of what it does.
Brilliant. And what's your why? Why did you get into that?
The origin story.
Yeah.
So I've got a friend of mine who lives up in Chester. So I don't get to see him very often, and we maybe meet up once a year, maybe. And we met up in Wembley. This was pre-COVID. He's been single quite a while. Bless his cotton socks. And so the conversation initially leads to his dating and things like that. So we were talking about his dating experience. He'd been on 2 dates quite recently to that conversation you were having. And one was mildly okay, and the other one wasn't a great date at all. And he was talking about, those dates and his experience. But one of the things that really intrigued me, and it kind of made my mind wander off a little bit, was that he attributed the dates down to a lack of compatibility in zodiacs. Okay. He said my star sign didn't match with her. She was, and I'm a. He said it, and my mind kind of wandered for a bit. I've read horoscopes my whole life.
Right.
Just general interest in that kind of area, but never explored a business in it before. Yeah. And he carried on talking. My mind wandered to that. So I don't understand this, my friend. If the zodiac compatibility piece is so important to you, just use a bloody app. Do it for you. And he was, I couldn't even think of that. Let's have a look. So he had an iPhone, Android, so we both went on to have a look. This was a good 18 months, maybe 2 years before COVID when this conversation happened. And both had it, couldn't find anything at the time. There was nothing.
Right.
So that was quite interesting. I'd had a tech startup before. It was more of a lifestyle startup than a serious scale-up. And I'd been waiting for the right kind of opportunity, the right interesting idea to come up and sink my teeth into again. I'd done it great at that point. I thought this was quite interesting. I'm already interested in astrology. He's looking at it. So it was that old, people say you get the napkin out at the bar. Kind of thing. So I was like, what would it look like? What would you want it to do? Drawing out what this website at the time, the apps was at that point were kind of relatively newish. And how would it look? Well, we do the app like this, we do the website like this, and what would you want it to do? How would you want it to look? And that's how it developed out from that conversation from a friend's kind of dating experience, was how it started developing out. And it really initially started as a dating app. So that's how we, thinking of it at the beginning. and looking at the market that developed slightly away from it. It still offers it as a service, but really the offering really developed into that friendship, bringing people together in friendship and that kind of compatibility. And that's where it started to become even more interested. People became a lot more interested in what we were doing as well. We started to garner a lot more interest in the project. So that's the origin story. That's kind of how it all came about. It's interesting.
Excellent, very good. How did you go about thinking, how do we turn this into a business then? What was that? You mentioned that you started to reposition a little bit, but how did you turn that into a business?
So we had to look at the market first. Well, I had to look at the market first and have a look at if there was a market there in the first place. It's kind of that. It's more the lean startup model before I'd read the lean startup.
Okay.
And seeing, is there a viable model here to go forward and start a business with? So I did a bit of that market research. I was looking at the astrology industry, specifically dating app industry was well defined at that point and quite busy. So I knew that part was okay, but highly competitive.
Yeah.
The astrology piece was really interesting. It wasn't very competitive at all, and there was a lot of scope, and there was a huge niche there, a really large niche. Niches are normally quite small areas you can dip your toe into, but when you start going geographically into other areas around the world, you realise how large a niche this is.
Right.
And so that became really interesting, looking at the other markets internationally, aside from just the UK. And we have our own, kind of embedded astrology in this country. I could read in Mystic Makes horoscopes in the Sun newspaper, and everybody of a certain generation knows who Mystic Make is, on the TV and all kinds of things. And so we kind of had that embedded into us over a period of time anyway. And it was interesting to have my friend. Normally, it was more the girls, my wife and her friends, what's your star sign? If we have to, you're a typical Libra, or you're a typical, and talk about it. This is the first time a guy talking about it, in the origin piece. So I found that quite interesting. And when I delved into those stats, I found there was a 49-51% split of interest between males and females, which is in stark contrast to the dating app industry where it's heavily male.
Right. Okay.
So I found that really interesting as well. And the more we looked into that, the more we looked into demographics, and Gen Z started becoming very, very, really pushing that niche forward as well in tech. And it became more and more interesting, more viable. And yeah, that was good validation. Dating apps validated us as well. So when they cottoned on to the interest growing, they started adding the star signs into their filters.
All right.
Which validated us even more.
Yeah.
So we just used them as validation as well. So every time a business responded to the interest, we pulled that and used it as part of our validation as well. So it was interesting. Yeah. So there to work with.
So what sort of stage are you at now?
So we developed our prototype initially at the University of Hertfordshire. We put it into students' hands. Had really, really, really good feedback, except for one specific page, which they didn't like.
Right.
So back to the drawing board with that page. Quite an important page, just where all the Zodiac information is held.
All the what information?
There's Zodiac information.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's their star sign data and things like that. And we wanted that to look right for them. That was really important. They want to be more graphical, a lot more easy on the eye. So we took that back to the drawing board and redesigned that page, which we've done now. And in hopefully next week, that new version will be back in their hands. And then we'll do that with the University of Hertfordshire students probably for a few months before launching in the UK in August.
So how many students have you had going through and using it?
Well, we've had quite a bit of different types of engagement. So being at the incubator gives us varied engagements with the students. So we have students that have heard about the business just organically, people talking. But we also have student projects, so students that come in and do specific projects with us. So whether that be marketing, social media and creating things, or PR, different things that they'll do on campus. So these different sporadic parts of engagement between different student teams that help us reach maybe wider than what some of the other business here have. And we're the only really kind of startup like us at the business incubator. So it's really different to what's currently on offer. So we've had really good feedback from students, and we've got user groups that we use now, regular user groups that we can get feedback from.
Great. So you're at the point of generating revenue. Are you charging yet?
It's going to be a free app initially. We do have a revenue model, and it's a varied revenue model because it targets different generations. They have different spending habits, and so we have to facilitate those things into the revenue model. But it won't be revenue model straight away. We might start with a few ads, but that'll be it for the beginning while we're scaling out.
Yeah,
and then we'll get to full revenue. Our key market's India.
Okay,
that's our key market. So,
and why India then? Apart from the obvious size, the population, but why India?
Because astrology is embedded into their culture.
Okay.
So, for example, couples will go to, in India and Sri Lanka, for example, couples will go to an astrologer before they get married to ensure that they have that zodiac compatibility. Yeah. So that embedding in their culture and that general acceptance of astrology into their just way of life makes it a really interesting market for us. And we're seeing different trends between different markets geolocationally. So we have different types of astrology around the world. Over here, we use what we generally tend to refer to as Western astrology with Libra and Scorpios and stuff. And then you have Vedic, you have Chinese. And they're all slightly different. They give different readings and different personality traits according to each sign. But we're finding that that's starting to mix up a little bit. And Gen Z specifically are becoming interested in alternative astrologies, geolocationally. So whereas we'd be looking at, Chinese astrology in Asia, we're now looking at Chinese astrology in the West.
Yeah. So if I'm a consumer from the UK going on and I'm using the service, using the app, I might be looking for essentially the what would you call it? Is it recommendations or profiling from all of the different zodiac ideas from around the world, not just my own?
Yeah, you'd be able to choose between Western, Vedic, and Chinese astrologies, and then be able to match according to those astrologies. And that was really important for us to add that, because there's lots of apps out there that do the horoscopes that you can get readings from, and there's kind of palm readings as well, and all these types of apps. But there's no one that's really took on the compatibility piece properly and seriously. And so it's really important that we're able to do that and offer what people.
Yeah. So what's the ultimate goal? What's the end game?
Global domination.
Yeah, of course. Good.
Well, what it is, I mean, our core markets are the UK, US, and India, and with India being potentially the largest, but their spending psychology is different as well in India. They tend to be more micropayments. So they're the largest markets. We have other markets that are potentially huge that we need to explore. Brazil, Australia, and to name a couple. That's not including places like Korea and Japan. So there are other markets to explore, but internationally is where the end goal is to be in those locations and to be the number one compatibility app for astrology.
Brilliant. And I see you've already been successful with a couple of awards, the Great British Entrepreneur Awards for one. You're a finalist in that, and you're in the Startup Top 50 or something, I think I saw as well.
Yeah, so the World Festival Startup Awards was last year, and that was a process. The Great British Entrepreneurs British Entrepreneur Awards, and came slightly before that. We were finalists for that. We love a space startup. If you're going to lose to something, right, you got to go for something super cool like a space startup.
Yeah, he was a previous guest actually. He's been on ScaleUp Radio as well. Actually, quite phenomenal. We literally had a rocket scientist, yes, on the podcast.
Yeah, so that was interesting. And we're going into that again this year. Because we're different buggers.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The two you got shortlisted against both of you to do with the stars, but in a very different way. Yeah,
yeah, very different. Yeah. So, but no, I was really proud to. I hadn't even finished that application with Great Britain. It was kind of submitted for me, so that was really nice to have that. It was our first kind of big piece of recognition that there's something there, and it came on the back of an unsuccessful grant application with Innovate UK. So it all kind of tied up nicely to the end. Oh, yay! And then we went from that straight into the World Festival Startup Awards, which was really, really interesting because it was a multi-phased voting process. Yeah. So we had to first get enough votes from our own community first. So people on social media and all that kind of thing, LinkedIn, it went out everywhere. You know, everyone in the team put it out, vote for us, vote for us, vote for us. We got through that, which was great. And then it went to the World Festival Star community themselves. They had to vote, and then judges as well. So it went through all of those processes, and then they come up with a list of the top 50 from that. And we got in, and we were very, very, very because again, it was further recognition and validation of what they're doing.
Yeah, really good. And you mentioned Mystic Meg. Did I see a LinkedIn post about Mystic Meg?
You did. It's really exciting. So Mystic Meg herself, she passed away last year in March. Her business continues, and her horoscopes will continue done with another astrologer that was working with her. But I'm working alongside the company at the moment to look at their tech offering, improve their tech offering, look at potential revenue streams that we can add to Mystic Meg's brand. And they approached us, and again, it was really nice to have that because it was almost full circle for me. You know, from being very, very, very young, I didn't have many books in my house growing up, you know, really low socioeconomic background. So newspapers were the first things I started reading outside of school when I learned to read. And Mystic Meg and her horoscopes were one of the first things that interested me. And I was really young at that point, you know, 10, 11 or something like that. And I carried on reading horoscopes over the years, and then I had friends around me on, you know, stuff on this, stuff on that, and, you know, you're typical this, you're typical that. And I had it all around me, started in Inzodiac, had this all going on, and then I got a phone call from the lovely Janine, and she had seen me on another podcast, really interested in the project, really liked what we were doing. It fit really well with, you know, what Mystic Meg were looking to go forward with from there. And yeah, we met up here at the University of Hertfordshire Business Incubator and had a conversation and looked at how we could work together going forward and, you know, tech-wise, brand-wise. And yeah, it's a really positive looking partnership. So
good. And I guess when we think of astrology and astrologers, we think of Mystic Meg and we think of Russell Grant, don't we? Probably as the two.
Yeah, they're the two, aren't they? The two big ones. And there are others. I think, you know, it depends on which newspaper you read, really, doesn't it? Which one, which names people. There are a couple of other big names. But
so what's it taken to get you to where you are now? What are the key things you've had to overcome?
Such pain.
I know this is we're not putting out the video here, but Gavin's just you can see on his face that there's been quite a few bits of challenges along the way. To go on then.
So when I first started looking at developing Inzodiac, it was just me by myself. I'd had a few startups. I'd had one tech startup, and I had a few other partnerships that I'd been in up to that point. And the partnerships hadn't ended very well. And so I thought to myself, I need to take this one independently. So there's nobody that can interfere with, I can push it where it needs to go.
Right.
And so I started to do that. And I got a developer in, a UK-based developer that outsourced via a software platform. And, gave him the idea, he started developing, how it would look in slides and things like that.
And how did you find the developer in the first place?
So I used a platform called Freelancer.
Okay.
So on Freelancer, you get developers, designers, copywriters, anything from all over the world.
Yeah, like Fiverr and Upworks, and yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to that. But I've been using Freelancer for years for different projects. Yeah. So I was quite familiar with the accounting on there. So we started to work anyway. And it went on and on and on and on and on. It seemed like it was never going to stop. And he didn't meet any of his own delivery times. And so I got to a point where I thought to myself, and even the advisors here at the incubator, you need to call this, like something needs to change. So I called it, it needs to stop. You need to hand over the code and things like that, which he did, but it was incomplete. So I didn't pay him, all of his money.
Yeah.
We ended up in court.
Oh.
I turned up unprepared and late, which helped. So I lost.
Oh dear.
I shouldn't have, because legally, everything I needed covered legally, I had covered. But I just wasn't prepared enough to.
Right. So that's the key lesson there. Is
it's a really key lesson, and it is a long journey. When you're going to the small claims court, for example, this one was. It's long, lots of paperwork. You've got to make sure you do your homework, that you get other cases where certain things have been met, and you make sure you meet those things. And on all that work, it was just that nearer part to the case, the final case itself, where I hadn't. I missed some opportunities where a judge offered to rule, and he was definitely in my favour at that point, and I knew that the final hearing was coming up, so I said no. I said yes. You would have ruled in my favour right then. So there's a lot of lessons, but for I don't recommend it. Let's just say that the time and effort it took, I still ended up out of pocket. So it's kind of one of those things where, if you're doing it by yourself, is it really worth it? Because if you get one thing wrong, it will go against you. One small technicality which you had covered before, but you've not covered in the final hearing, and it falls against you. So I don't recommend it to anyone.
What was the key reason that you? I mean, you said preparation, but was there a key element that they ruled on that wasn't in your favour? What was it that went against you?
So the main thing that I was fighting is that he brought the case against me as an individual, rather than the business in which he was contracted.
Right.
And I didn't really present my case very well to defend that point. And I did invoices and things like that. I just didn't present what I need to present. And so that went against me in the end. I mean, I still couldn't believe the outcome when the judge was reading it. But at the same time, in hindsight, I look back and say I was so unprepared for the actual hearing itself.
All right. So you had
no wonder.
Yeah. So you had a rocky start with the code. Then what?
So that code was useless. No one would work on it. So I was a few grand out of pocket, with use of code. And so it was scaling that back now and saying, like, how can I get this project back on track? Firstly, I'm going to need some time to gather up my own financial resources to get it started again, which I did. So we're now pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And so back to the platform, back to what I'm familiar with. I'll outsource to development houses around that region and go on that project thing that I'm familiar with doing. And so that's what I did. And I got a team in development house in India, and they started working on the project. COVID hit, we went into lockdown, but India was behind us somewhat. So when we went into lockdown, India was still working as normal.
Right.
So they continued to work. Then COVID came to them.
Yeah.
And so the development house just disappeared. And when I say disappeared, I mean completely disappeared. It got to a point where the development house I was working with, just one person talking to the clients, know where any of the developers were, or even if they were alive, they didn't know anything. And so it was a matter of trying to get that code back from them and moving it on to the next. So at this point, I had to bounce back a bit of buffer to help me get by. So then you still had other development houses on the platform saying, we're okay, we're still working remotely from home, we're separating this and the other, but we're still working. And so I moved it on. And each time the same thing happened, moved it on. Went through 4 development houses in India, 4 different ones. So it came out of that fragmented code and different people working on it at different points. Loads of money down the drain as well, because each one needs a startup, startup offering. Nightmare, absolute nightmare. But I put parts of the code there and I thought, let's just get through this pandemic and then kind of re-energize. And then I got COVID. And I wasn't one of the lucky ones who ended up with a sniffle and a cold. I'm asthmatic. So once the cough started for me, and anyone that had COVID will know about that dry cough that never stops. Once the cough started, that became quite dangerous for me because I couldn't take my pump. So every time I inhaled, I was coughing.
Right.
So if you can't get it pumping, and so that came a bit scary to me. So I stopped breathing from my mouth, just breathing from my nose. It was the only solution that I could on at the time. And subsequently, what happened from there is I just started deteriorating. My oxygen levels started deteriorating. My wife was monitoring me with one of those little devices that's on your finger and all that kind of thing. And she was, I was propped up in bed and kind of in one position the whole time. But I remember coming round. I say coming round. My eyes weren't open. But I wasn't asleep at that point. I was coming around, and my wife was still gets me.
Yeah, goodness me, obviously a very, very difficult time. Yeah.
My wife was on the phone to the ambulance saying, he's in a bad way.
Yeah.
He's really in a bad way. And I was trapped inside my body. I think to myself, I'm not in a bad way. It's like inside my body. I was like, I'm okay. I'm it's not as bad as you think. But to her, and she was seeing and reading, she was saying it was really bad. And so the paramedics turned up and they wired me up and put a ventilator on and stuff like that. And within an hour, them being there or something like that, I was kind of not sweating anymore and struggling to breathe and all that kind of thing. So it was difficult, really difficult, really emotional. But I came out of it, and there's no long COVID, so blessings, compared to some other people that weren't as fortunate. And that really kind of made me think about Inzodiac and how I was going to take it forward, because I was by myself at that point, and I thought to myself, that old thing, you are now a single point of failure. Yeah. As an individual. So now you need to think about bringing people in, and
so how did you go about that? Because you've got the obviously the challenge that you'd like to do that, but you've got no money coming in. So how did you get people on board without being able to pay them salaries as such? Yeah,
it's not easy, that part, and I don't envy anybody who's there at the moment, because to some extent we're still there, but we have a team. But it's really, really difficult, and it took a long time. I put myself out on a couple of startup advertising platforms that were free, and I posted up, potential co-founding roles and things like that. But you can't just give people a job like that and start handing over equity to complete strangers. It takes time to develop that relationship.
Yeah.
And so I'd met a few people, I continued to meet a few people. I'd been an incubator for a while now. During lockdown, we weren't on site, but afterwards we came back. And most of my cohort disappeared. Their businesses, they've just folded up their businesses and discontinued. There was only 2 of us left in my cohort. But one of the businesses was a marketing social media startup. A guy called Alfie, who I got along with really well the whole time from when I first started the incubator. And he had to wrap up his business during COVID because his clients all dried up. He didn't need to do any social media. And so he had to go out and find work, find a full-time job and do that piece. And so a bit later, I met up with him and I said, look, that's your skill set. That marketing, social media is really not my skill set. I'm looking for people to join me. Do you fancy coming on this journey with me? This is what's happening so far, and this is what we're doing. And he was like, this would be, so cool. We bounce off each other really well, me and Alfie. We always have. It's one of those strange compatibility things, I suppose. Our personalities kind of really bounced off of each other.
Yeah.
And so I put Alfie in as a co-founder, because we've had this, long relationship in the sense we've known each other quite some time. Neha was part of a media project at the university. She was doing her degree and doing an internship with Inzodiac. So when she finished that, she came and joined us on board. It was all equity.
Okay.
And the same for everyone else that came afterwards. Practically, he's doing our VR and AI and he's looking at all that side of things. And Kenneth, who's our full stack developer, he's a current student here at the university.
Great. So what did you learn, and what would you say to others listening about giving away equity in exchange for their time? Then what lessons have you learned?
I think if you set yourself up and you set up the fundamentals from the beginning, there's nothing to be afraid of. I think people can be a bit greedy when it comes to, especially founders, can be a bit greedy when it comes to their equity. But we really view business as much more attractive when you have a team than when you're just solo. And like I say, that single point, had I not come in, that difficult situation, Zodiac would probably never exist, and maybe someone else somewhere down the line would bring it out. So you've got to look at that. Sometimes you need a break as well. Sometimes you need to be able to hand over some control, some responsibilities to other people to make sure that business has got the best chance of success. And so bringing in Alfie as a co-founder and then bringing in other team members like Neha and Kenneth, and everyone's really sprung out of this university. I mean, Alfie's alumni from here, Neha's alumni, Kenneth's a current student, Pratik's alumni. Everything's really sprung from here now, but it's been a long journey to get there. And I think you can't be greedy with your equity. Now, what I did was I split my equity into A and B class shares.
Okay.
And so A class being, the voting and the main strategy and direction, and B class being, equal value, but issue out to people to get them involved. And that's where most of my offering has been, with the exception of Alfie. And I think it's better to have a little bit of something than a lot of nothing.
Yeah.
So if you can continue, of course, there's tons of stories of successful solo founders out there. There's loads of successful stories. But I bet there's a ton more unsuccessful that you don't hear about. A hell of a lot. And I definitely think you should take it to a point where nobody interferes with your vision and your goal. Get it to a point, but after that, you really need to bring in help. If you're scaling,
and how
if your lifestyle of business
Yeah. Yeah. And how much equity have you been able to retain, or put it the other way, how much have you had to give away?
I've always maintained to keep the control in that sense. So
are we talking 51%? Are we talking 75? What?
I haven't given away that much yet.
Yeah. Right.
I would for the right team members and bring the right people on, those relationships developing. Like I say, if you have shareholders agreements and you have deliverables and you have vested periods, which I do in shareholders agreements, and everyone knows what they've got to do to earn the shares. You're not just giving away 2.5% to that person, 5% to that. There's a goal and a delivery as part of that over a period of years, which would give investors that assurance that those people involved in those businesses for those periods of time as well.
Good.
So if you have those things, you're getting that delivery back, which is increasing the value to your business, which you wouldn't have potentially done by yourself. So there's value there. You may be giving away a bit of equity, but you're increasing the value of your company and your startup.
Brilliant. And how have you managed because by the sounds of it, you're not. It's a freemium model at the moment. So how are you surviving? As how is Gavin surviving, taking home and paying his bills at home? How's he managing that?
We're all working, all of us still.
Right. Okay. So you still got jobs.
All of us are still working, and the way I see it is like this: so I've did the whole business myself for my own, so it's all bootstrapped in that sense. And it's getting to a point now, especially with the new partnership, I do need to start looking at bringing in experts and therefore potentially bringing in investment.
Right.
But I don't. There's different ways you go with this. I think if you have a minimum salary that you can take home, and that is, livable for you. That's you're comfortable. You can take it at home, and obviously you'll have a maximum guessing there or dreamland kind of figure for salary. In a startup, especially in an early stage bootstrap startup, you've got to think of it like this: if you get investment or grants or anything like that, and everyone goes full time, that's coming out of that money, obviously.
Yeah.
If your minimum salary expectation, and I'm just getting this up there, there's going to be range for everybody, it's going to be completely different. But let's just say your minimum salary expectation is 50 grand, let's just say. That's going to come out of your business. So if my minimum salary is 50 grand and I bring in an investor under an SEIS at 250 grand, that's 50 grand if it's gone like that. Mm. Now, if the investor wants you in there for time, and expects that to happen, that's different.
Yeah.
Because that's their expectation. But there could be a middle ground to that as well, where you go half, in that sense, and you split your time. But you really want to do the best thing to grow your business. And there's no one route that's the right answer.
Yeah.
Whether it's staying at work or going full time or whatever. It really depends on the people you get on board and their expectations are to help you grow business. There will come a time where I'll need to do it, and I'm looking forward to doing it. But I don't want to impact the finance.
Yeah, when do you think that time might be? What's the hope, the plan?
We've only just started to look at now potentially fundraising. So we've got to finish off the financial plan, 3 to 5 year, which is my weakest area because I've dyscalculia, so I'm really not good with figures. I have to keep things very, very simple.
Right.
So I've got help of being at the incubator is amazing because you've got so many people around here that can help you with all different kinds of things. So I've got help, hopefully Tuesday next week. Now next week time we should be able to get that one finalised, or at least nearly finalised. And then it's looking for investment to bring in just those extra team members that I need. Not just to help Inzodiac, because I think we have a good foundation for Inzodiac, but it's also to develop out the partnership with Meg as well, and ensure that we've got that right team to facilitate what we need to do.
Brilliant, very good. So, if we're catching up in 5 years' time, Gavin, what would have to have happened for you to say that they've been successful 5 years?
So Inzodiac will be established in the UK, the US, India, Brazil, and Australia.
Yeah. Good.
Established. The team will be very much international, but still quite lean. And people will be wanting to buy us and asking them off.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. Very good. And what do you think is what's the key thing you've got to overcome, or the key challenge you might face in reaching that in the 5 years? What's the big thing?
Competition, probably, and new competitors coming into the market. Not too concerned about it right now because there isn't much. There are some, but there isn't much. Market's so huge. It's bigger than the dating app market and astrology. There's a lot of scope there. Yeah. I suppose it would be the change generationally of how people spend money.
Right.
There's a real big difference how millennials spend money, how Gen Z spend money, and going forward from that, younger and older millennials and younger and older Gen Z, and their psychology of spending. That's quite interesting. I really enjoy looking at those things. I really enjoy looking at design and stuff like that as well.
So what are the key differences then in the way that we spend?
So Gen Z predominantly tend to prefer micro purchases, very small amounts and very frequent amounts, which is why things like Roblox and Minecraft and these guys are doing so well, because the kids have no issue spending micro purchases. Millennials are really kind of used to and familiar with subscription models. Yeah, and that basis, and then it changes geographically. There's some areas that prefer things being free and run on adverts, and some areas that don't look at advertising very well. In the West here in general, don't really like advertising. But in India, for example, it's accepted. It's part of a free offering. So it really changes generationally and geographically, and how you offer a product to be able to generate that revenue effectively.
Brilliant. No, really, really good. And I wish you all greater success with what you're doing. It does sound really, really interesting. Are you up for a couple of quick fire questions before we draw to a close?
Go for it. I'll take a deep breath.
Go on. And so if you go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
There's a world out there that you don't know about. The tech world. So I was always into tech as a kid, always into tech. But I didn't know about tech startups. No one in my family owned a business or anything like that. So there was no kind of entrepreneurship in my family. So if I was going back to my younger self, I would open up that world.
Right. Brilliant. Excellent. Really good. You've already mentioned The Lean Startup as a book. Any other books that you'd recommend?
Oh, God, there are. I've consumed quite a lot lately, and I can't remember what was. There was one about app design. I cannot remember. Was it called Hooked? Something like that. It was about how certain apps and websites.
Okay. But if it comes to you, let us know and we'll put it in the show notes. That'd be good.
There was a few, so I'll try and send some over.
Yes. So you're obviously into apps. Obviously, you're developing Inzodiac. Any other apps that you use on a regular basis?
I'm on Canva quite a lot. Next there, like designing, so I use Canva frequently. I'm not great on social media. Yeah. LinkedIn's my kind of go-to social. Yeah. But apart from that, I don't really use a lot, to be honest with you.
Oh, fair enough. So who would you say has had the most influence on you as a business leader?
I really like and I read a lot of his stuff, Richard Brent, and only I think there's just that anyone that's got any kind of dyslexia or anything would relate. Similar to me, he wasn't any good with numbers, in Empire, So he's going to look to saying you can have dyslexia and you can be super successful.
Good, excellent. And what's you mentioned social media and you got people in the business. But, what is your most successful lead generation tactic? How are you finding customers, or is it all through the university at the moment?
We're doing both. So we're hoping for a collaboration. We just recently came out of a meeting, Singapore for collaboration with Imperial College as well. Right. So between the university and fraternities and social media, of which TikTok is becoming interestingly quite popular. We had one post go viral very quickly before we were really prepared to capitalize on it going viral, and really didn't grab those followers quickly enough. But yeah, between those two is how we're branching out initially. Yeah. Great.
I mean, it almost feels like it could be starting at the universities and all about connecting and making connections. It could almost be another Facebook in the making, couldn't it?
And that's what I say to the guys here when they say, "Oh, just universities." I say, "Yeah, just keep it small. Keep your first user base small and as close as possible, and grow those communities, and then move on to the next and the next. And before you know it, you have this platform." People talk about dating apps, for example, all the time, how there's real users on them and things like that. But with us here, we can freshers a real big thing here. So, for example, in the next freshers, we're hoping to do a freshers matching. Okay. So we'll be matching freshers up to their star signs, but that'll be in person. We'll be using Inzodiac as a platform, but it'll be in person. So we have the benefit of being able to run the in-person and have the technology as well. And I think that's really important to get people together.
Fantastic. So if people would like to get hold of you, Gavin, or find out more about Inzodiac, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so you can just search me on LinkedIn, Gavin Prime, Inzodiac, and that'll pop up. And there's a website, inzodiac.co.uk. My email is gp@inzodiac.com.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and the socials are all at Inzodiac, so you can follow on there.
Very good. Well, Gavin Prime, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been really good. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.